Hi, so this is challenge number 2 for 2020. And so for the Sol, that was meant to take all year, has probably speeded up a little bit, especially with the current situation. And while I've been doing it, and I've absolutely loved doing it, my piece started getting a little bit too long, and I just decided that I'd like something else along the same sort of lines, but just to try something a little bit different, just to vary it up a little bit for the second half of 2020. So we're going to start with white fabric to start off with, and it's going to be a book working on the pages, and there'll be different tasks and challenges for each of the pages in your book. So I'm going to look at, to start off with, just a construction of a really simple fabric book. So as my base, I am using cotton wadding again. So it's the fabric that I used on my Sew for the Soul piece, mainly because it's very tactile, very comforting. It's lovely to sew into, but you could use anything. It could be calico, a wool blanket, some vintage textiles. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is it needs to be a pale white colour. I've done mine 6-inch square, so I've just made myself a template just from a piece of paper so that I could cut out pieces of my fabric. And what I've done is I've cut them out in twos, folded them together. I'll come to that little bit next. And I've got 4 sets. And all I'm doing at the moment is I'm just stitching them to make a book. So I'm using a blanket stitch. So all I've done is I've taken my first 2 pieces here, laid them alongside each other, and done a blanket stitch from one end to the other. So I've got my end here. So I'm going to get my next set of pages and just going to start blanket stitching those together as well. So it's basically a case of bringing your needle through, having it going along, and then what you want to make sure that you've done is you've caught where this stitch is here, and you go through that section, wrap your thread round and pull it through, and just create your first blanket stitch. Just loosen that off. I've pulled it a little bit too tight. There we go. That's the next one. And then the next one's just lay my thread along. So I'm getting my needle in where I've done my other stitch here. So it's going through that one, through the next one, just wrap my thread round and pull it through. So again, just where I've had my other one. Now this is all going to disappear. You're not going to be able to see any of this by the time you've got it all stitched together. I'm just using a cotton thread, but you could use a perlé. Again, it doesn't really matter because this bit is not going to be seen. However, you might decide when you've done all that that you don't want a cover on your book. You may decide that you quite like this. I know a few people out there are bookmakers, so you may have a method of stitching your pages together that you want to use. It's perfectly fine. I just decided just to use a blanket stitch. I was going to look at doing some specific Chinese bookmaking stitches, but because I know that I want to cover my book, I just thought, oh, I'm just going to do something fairly simple. Oh, just a simple. Needle doesn't want to come through that bit. Come on, through you come. Got a bit of the wadding caught on there. There we go. So I would take my blanket stitch from here all the way down the end, and then get my other set of pages, pop that there, and do the same going back. So I'll then have it all blanket stitched together, so it will hold together really, really nicely. Then what I've done is I've cut the bits for the outside, for the cover of my book. So what I've done is I have a strip that's going to be the spine that will go here, and then I've made myself 2 fronts. So the fronts, I've done them 6 inches wide, but I've made them a little bit longer So it's about 7 inches long, because what I'll do is when it comes to the spine, we'll pop that together and turn it up so that you get an edge on your book, and do the same at the other side. Attach that, and then this will be attached top and bottom, so that we've then got a blank book to start working on. And what I'm going to do is have a plan that there will be tasks for people to do. The one thing that I would like you to think about though is one colour that's going to run throughout your book. So on every single page there will be that colour. So it could be your favourite colour. I think I was going to do originally yellow because I'm really loving yellow, but because I know that I'd like to mix some other colours in, because seeing everybody else's Surf for the Soles, there's been some amazing colour combinations. So I think I'm going to go for a grey, just have that neutral. So when I say you're going to have it on every page, it could be the fabric, it could be a button, it could be the stitching thread that you use, a bead, a piece of lace, something you drag, but there will be something grey on every page, because that then's going to tie everything together. But we will mix in lots and lots of other colours and lots of different techniques with this. So I just thought just having the pages will be quite nice to start working from. So there will be prompts. I will be adding to this video. This bit was just about getting your book put together. So the second part of the video will be the start of the project and just giving you a little bit more information. So the first bit, get your book. So we've got the pages stitched together however you want to do it. I did a blanket stitch just to get all 3 of them all joined together, so they're all nicely joined. So I've now got my basis of my fabric book. So a little bit like we did with Surf for the Soul, the next thing is to get your stash of materials together. And one of the things that I'm thinking about doing, or I'm suggesting that you do with your book, is you choose one colour that's going to be consistent throughout, so it joins it all together. So I'm going to choose grey, loads of different shades of grey. So on each of the tasks that we do, any of the pages, there will be something grey. It could be a piece of grey fabric, bit of grey thread, grey buttons, decorative piece. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be grey. So we're going to start looking at our first double page. We're not going to worry about the cover at all at the moment, because I think we need to get some of the book going, and then it'll give you some ideas about the sorts of techniques you'd like to bring out onto the front of your actual book. So I've started pinning the different pieces together. So I've gathered some different grey fabrics, and for each of the tasks then you can add the greys to the other colours. And the reason that I wanted to do that was when I've been seeing everybody Surf for the Soul pieces, I've been jealous of all the colour combinations. And even though I love my grey and yellow, and I've actually got a little bit of yellow that I want to put in this first one, I did want to have a go at looking at lots and lots of different colours as well. So with my first one, it's going to be greys and blues. What I'm then going to suggest is a task or a theme or something just to stick to across your double pages. So the first one is going to be squares with a circle, and it's up to you how you do your combination. I'll show you how I did mine in a second. And I'd like you to try and limit yourself to a straight stitch. That's it, keeping it really, really simple to start off with. So what I've been doing is I have pinned my first sections together. I'm not sure yet about this one. I quite like those fabrics. I've been hoarding some bits of fabric just because I think they're really yummy, but I really like this side. So I've got here a piece of blue linen, a piece of it's like a very, very dark charcoal grey. It's a little bit smooth. It's not quite a silk, but it's a lovely, lovely smooth, very fine cotton. And then there's another piece of linen, and I have some stripy fabric that I'd got from a mixed bag of all different sorts of bits and pieces. I just thought it was lovely because it got the pale and the grey, the blue, tiny little bit of mustard, so I wanted to use that and use it as a stripe to go through. And then I've done, out of a little bit of hand dyed cotton, a circle. I just drew round a pot and did that with the circle. So just keeping it really, really simple. I've got this all pinned in place, and we're going to start stitching. Now the thing that we're not going to worry about is what's going to happen on the other side, because what will happen is when we've done the next 2 pages, these 2 here will get stitched together, so you won't see the backs, and then we're going to do different things down the joins of the pages, so we don't need to worry so much about the back. The other side, because this is quite busy, I'd drawn a circle out onto my big piece of fabric and cut the circle out so that I've got the positive and the negative, because I think windows are really, really nice. Whether I'll use this piece or not, I'm not 100% sure. Not quite sure what's going on there. I quite like the overlap, and it might be that I still leave it as the cotton wadding background and maybe stitch into here. Or one of the things that I could do if I wanted, I could cut the circle out of the cotton wadding and actually attach a piece onto the back here and stitch through, because again, this will get covered with the cover of our book, so we don't need to worry about the backs of our pieces, because I know a few of you asked me with the Sew for the Soul pieces what I was going to do with the backs. With that, I'm not too worried, but with this, because it's going to be a book, it's going to be quite nice to have it disappear. So when you're ready, it's going to be a case of stitching. So I'm using a range of threads. So I have some of my silk threads, perlés, I've got some linen threads, some vintage linen, some cotton threads, all different sorts. It's totally up to you. I don't tend to use DMC threads. I do every now and again, but I just love these sort of textures. And I like the different thicknesses. The linen threads, even though it can be quite hard to sew with, it's a lovely thick texture compared to the really fine silks. The needles that I'm going to be using, a few people have asked about that. I use a variety of hand embroidery needles. If I'm using an embroidery needle, it's usually round about a size 7. So it's got a head that's not too wide to go through your fabric, and when you're doing knots and things like that, but it's not too small that you can't thread it. But I also use the shishiko needles. So I have these ones here, the actual shishiko. These are the long ones, and these give you a really, really nice long needle, especially when we're doing running stitch, just to keep going in and out, so that they're really, really nice to use. So starting to stitch. Oh, I didn't want to go in there. I'm going to use my silk thread first, and I'm going to do some tacking stitches so that I can take my pins out. But what I'm going to do with this particular piece is I'm not going to take the tacking stitches out. I do want them to become part of the piece. So I'm not going to come right out onto the outside. I'm just going to start on my grey, and I'm just going to do some really nice big tacking stitches, but I'm just going to try and keep them fairly even and fairly regular. I have got some vintage textile pieces where the tacking stitches are still in, and it's just so nice to see them. I just thought doing this particular piece, it would be quite nice to have them as part of your piece of work. So let's go across the other way. So this is going to be the first bit. Now, like I said, I'd like you just to use a straight stitch. We're going to explore, take some of the pins out as I go along, a lot more stitches in this than I did with the Sew for the Soul. With my Sew for the Soul, I tended to stick to a straight stitch. I think I used a few lazy daisies or chain stitches. I used quite a few different knots, pistol stitch, etc., but I didn't really explore a lot of different types of stitches. So because this is going to be a piece where we're going to work on different pages, I thought this would be a really, really nice opportunity to start to explore other stitches. So again, a little bit like with Sew for the Soul, I'm going to set challenges every so often, possibly, not quite sure yet, depends on how much I get done each week, but it could be that there's just little interspersed ones, little add-ons, and it's sort of going to evolve. I don't really have a plan at all for this particular project. It was just when I was thinking about what to do next. I absolutely love fabric books. I think they're so tactile, and they're incredibly precious. really, really precious. And this is just a really nice size, just to be able to hold. Okay, so I've just stitched, tacking stitch, big tacking stitch all around the edge. I'll tie that off. Tie it off at the back, just a couple of loops and a knot. And then I'm just going to run a tacking stitch down the middle of the straight piece. You don't have to lay it out like this at all. So this one I'm actually going to start right at the end. I'll go in that grey so you can see it. So this one's going to tack it all down all the way through. So I'm going through all the way through the layers right through to the back so that I know that it's going to hold everything in place. And as I'm going along, I can just remove the pins. Now, you don't have to leave the tacking stitches in. You could take them out if you wanted to, but obviously it's one of those things, because they're so big, you could decide that right at the end when you've finished your page. I might even decide to take them out afterwards, I don't know yet, but I just thought that I would leave them in for now, because again, it's just another way of using a straight stitch, and it's sort of like the foundation of your piece. One of the things that I have done with my layers of, just find a bit to tie that off on, my fabric, is I've actually frayed the edges. Now there's two different ways you can do this. You can sit and do it by hand, just pulling out the warps and wefts, or if you've got a teasel brush, you could use that just to pull the edges out. I'll probably demonstrate that on another video because I don't have my teasel brush to hand at the moment. I'm not sure where that is. So I've got everything now just pinned and tacked. I can take most of the pins out. I'm just going to leave that one there because that's my circle and I don't really want that to start flapping. So hopefully you can see. All I've done is stitched around the inside, so it's attached all these bits. On the back you can just see my tacking stitches. Okay. So then what I can start doing is then I can start doing all my different types of stitching, all my straight stitches. Even though using a straight stitch, it doesn't have to go in a line, so I can do some circular ones building up around there, which I think is probably where I will start, just so that I know that I've got my blue circle just tacked in. So fold the rest of your book back so that you have got your page. Just makes your life just that little bit easier. And then we're going into slightly smaller stitches now. With the stitches that you're doing, it is also nice to vary the length of the stitch, the bit that you leave in between. Some stitches could even be really, really long, and then you might just do some tiny little stitches just to couch them down. So I can show you that. When you get to a bit where you've got your fabric going underneath, it's a decision then that you need to make as to whether or not you're going to just disappear underneath and then reappear, or carry on stitching as if you can see the shape. And I think carrying on stitching is quite nice because it sort of adds that illusion that there is a circle when you look back at your stitching. Now with this one, even though I have got a tiny bit of yellow in my fabric, I am not going to do any yellow stitching. I'm just going to leave the tiniest bit of yellow there visible. There's a little bit more on the other side, but I want the grey and the blue to be the main colours of this particular page. I don't know why I chose grey and blue. I think it was because I'd got a bit of blue fabric that I found when I was doing my Sew for the Soul piece, and I was a little bit like, oh god, as if I've just limited myself to grey. and yellow. I could have thrown loads of other colours in, and I know a few of you suggested it would be nice with a pop of blue in there and other colours, but I think I just wanted to keep it all yellow and grey, and I'm pleased I did, because I think it came together with the variety of fabrics that I used. So this is really just to keep me going through the summer. It's got a knot. Okay, just the little tails just got knotted up there. Okay. So this is going to carry on all the way around. I've decided that it's going to knot itself up every time I start stitching. There we go. Okay. It's not the most exciting thing, just sitting and watching somebody hand stitching. It's not that quick. Very therapeutic to sit and do. I quite like doing it and chatting to you all, even though you're not here. It makes me feel like I'm not on my own, which I believe we've really built up a lovely community across the world. Thank you to everybody that keeps sending pictures of everything that's going on. So I'll carry on stitching all the way around. Just pop that in there for now, and I'll use other threads just to add a little bit more. So I've started the straight stitch coming around here, so I'll keep going around. I'll probably use a darker thread then and go around 2 or 3 more times, and then really start playing around with straight stitches, just going in one direction or another. So what I'll do is I'll sit and do a little bit of the hand stitching, and then I will come back with where I am up to. Okay, enjoy. Right, I've got this page just about done. Like I said, just kept it really simple with straight stitch. So I have left my tacking stitches in. I quite like them because it's the mix of threads, but I've just used a straight stitch in different ways. So we've got the tram lines running around the edge. Some of them create the full circle, but I thought it was quite nice just to stop it and use this edge of the fabric just as like a natural break for the stitching. The other half then, tiny seeding stitches. So it's just tiny little straight stitches in lots and lots of different directions. I love it because it creates this beautiful texture, and I use my silk threads for that, so you get a little bit of a sheen. Using your straight stitch to create some little stars, and then just using that grid shape, popped a little star there as well, and just stitched everything down. So I've kept it really simple, this particular half. The other half, I'd only got my circle and my long piece on. So what I've just sat and done is I've tacked down, again, some really big stitches, the pieces that are there, sort of mirrored that pattern over here, so that you've got this sort of repeat going on, so pages do link together. The circle that I cut out, which is here, I don't know whether or not I'm going to include that, but what I will do is all the bits that I've got, this might then come in again later on, so I will keep them all. I'll get a little basket of goodies all together. So the decision then that I'm having to make at this moment is I've added some more shapes. So I've got a little bit of dyed muslin, a little bit of sort of like see-through fabric. I quite liked that with the squares because I thought, ooh, cross stitch, that'd be quite nice in that sort of using the fabric, and it's nice that some of it's translucent and some of it's opaque. A little bit of lace down here at the side, and I just love the fact that there are these holes. It's just screaming out to be stitched, so I'll probably stitch through those. And then I just have this ribbon that's a measuring tape, and I thought that was quite cute there. This bit here is the bit that I've been pondering about, because I do want to try and mix things up a little bit. So with here we did a plique, so we've applied everything. With this one we're sort of beginning to do reverse, so we're beginning to cut in. So I think one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the semicircle and look at popping a bit of fabric behind. So I just think it mixes it up just a little bit. So I've just got my little scissors. So just work my way around the edge. So I've made sure that I've stitched my circle on first so that I know that that is attached. Okay, so just making my way around just to the edge. Now if you wanted to, you could have it as a flap. So if you'd done this before, you could end up fastening that back and then stitching that down so it becomes a flap, but because I've already done all this stitching, I don't really want to do that. I do want to take it out. But again, if you've not used cotton wadding for your background, if you use some other sort of fabric, you can obviously keep this shape and then it could be applied somewhere else. It could even go onto the other side, but because this is my cotton wadding, I'm not going to do that. So then all I need to think about then is the fabric that I want to put on the other side, because we're trying to have a little bit of sort of a narrative, so to speak, with our pages with different types of fabric. I thought I would probably use my blue and pop that behind, so you get that beautiful dark contrast, and the blue picks up the blue that I've used on this side. So this is one of the things that's quite nice by using a limited colour palette and a limited number of bits of fabric. You can end up then creating a really nice piece of work that has some links and similarities with the other page. And then because we're going to have the colour that's going from one page to the other, so my greys, you'll see those appearing elsewhere, then that will be fine, because the grey will continue to run throughout my project. So I'll just pin it in place. Now then it'll be up to you when you sat stitching as to what you fancy then doing inside your semicircle. So I've got my little stars at this side, so I'll probably repeat that there, and I will stitch around that raw edge just to make sure that it is well and truly stitched. So we're trying to keep our stitching with this one all based on a straight stitch, but a straight stitch could be back stitch, cross stitch, turn it into lots of different shapes. I've got it where I've stitched on here rather than following down. It's a bit like a patch, and I think sometimes the straight stitch is a very, very underrated stitch. Some people don't seem to use it that often, or it's just seen as one of those stitches that just gets used just to hold things together. So got my thread. So what I'll start doing first is just making sure that this is stitched on. So I'm going to just go over that raw edge, just pull that through. So I'm just coming up through my bottom piece of fabric, and then I'm going to go back down, just catching the edge, and I will work my way all the way around the edge. So hopefully at this point you've started getting some ideas about the sorts of colours that you'd like to use, sort of sketchbook. I've done mine as a bound sketchbook, but there is no reason whatsoever excuse me, as to why this still couldn't be a strip and it could become a concertina sketchbook. You might want to do them all as separate pieces and then present them in a sketchbook. They could be presented in a frame. It's really up to you. I'm just doing it this time in a book. There's quite a lot of people asked with the last piece of work, what was it going to be? So this time it's a book that's going to be a collection of pieces of work. Lots of different things, something each month, just to while away the time. So it's still following the basic principle that I had for the sew for the sole piece, which is just sitting and stitching, and I'm getting a bit addicted to this again. Busy planning other pages. I'm just going to trim a little bit now of that off. So I'm just a bit worried it's going to fold over. There we go. Getting a bit carried away with getting the fabrics ready for the next page or pages that are going to come up. So I'll keep filming these like I've been doing all the last ones, where it goes through a number of different techniques. I keep doing breaks in the video, usually because I run out of things to say, and I don't like the idea of just repeating myself, which I probably am doing even without thinking about it. Okay, now you can see a little bit of my cotton wadding on this, but I don't particularly mind, because what I'll probably end up doing is going over that join, probably with a little bit of lace or something, just to neaten it up. So I could have just cut out a semicircle and stuck it on the top, but I've now got, because I've got my appliqued circle around the edge, I've got a piece of fabric behind, and now because I've cut it out and we've gone down a depth, we're sort of getting a range of layers to our piece of work. And I think, as I've mentioned before, it's one of the things that I absolutely love, is just layering up things. One, it can cover things up if you've gone wrong, but also it just adds that texture, and I think textiles is all about texture. It's about stroking your work. This seems a bit of a weird thing to say, but I always find it really hard if I go to a textile exhibition and you're not allowed to touch anything, which I totally understand, but you do just want to touch it or stroke it or see how it actually feels. Okay, so I've just got the patch there, just on the back. Just tie it off, make a little loop and just pop it through a couple of times. Like I say, this is going to all get covered up, because once we put the cover on, you'll not be able to see. So I've just started stitching that down, so you can see a little bit of that fluffiness. I don't mind it, but I might decide, I've got some lace, so I quite like that. It could be that I have another piece that goes down, and this is when, like, working out the composition and things like that really starts playing around, because I've just pinned these bits on because I wasn't 100% sure, and now I don't like the fact that there's a gap between those two. So if I was going to put this on, I want to move that across, so that that's going to get tied in as well, and it might be that that needs then to go behind that, and that's going to come over the top, which is why I quite like pinning things on while I'm making a decision. I think the composition with these, it does sort of grow. I'm not really planning everything, sort of planning the layers. So with this one, we'd got the squares with the circle and the strip, but there wasn't a plan of how I was going to stitch it. It was just how I actually felt on the day that I started stitching. And on this side, this is just growing up, because originally I'd just got the two pieces of fabric on, and I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I liked those two together, and I think even though I've still gone just with the blues and greys, I quite like the little pop of yellow. The decision then that I've got to make is do I want to pop a little bit of yellow here, and it could be that I just end up doing one line. There is a tiny little bit of yellow that's on the strip which matches the fabric there, but you can't really see it, so I may decide just to do a yellow stitch down the side just so that it pulls that in. And it's that personal opinion and your own choices and things like that, that I just think is nice. It's just really, really organic with the way that that is developing. So I know I want to pop that on there when I've done that. And then, so what I'll be doing next is stitching around the edge, stitching all these on. It might be that when I've done this, I might decide that I don't want those on there anymore, and you can end up playing around with lots and lots of different things. So I've got some other bits of lace that I've been playing around with. I absolutely love this one. I think it's so pretty, and that looks quite nice on there because you've sort of got, oh, quite like that. It's got the semicircles on again. So it might be that I change my mind. This can take you half the time, but one of the things you do need to do is make a decision about just some pieces. Even if it's only 2 bits of fabric that you're really happy with, go with that. Don't try and plan every single page from start to finish. It could be that when you're working on this, you end up with some pages started and you don't know what to do with them, so you decide to leave them and then come back to them later. It really, really doesn't matter. So I've got this piece, which I think, because it's got the semicircles, which sort of ties in. Oh, and it just fits with 3 on there, so it could be that that's the bit that I end up popping on there. Just going to look at my strip. So I've got my little strip, and I'm not sure I quite like that, but I'm not right. No, I'm not 100% sure that that's right just there. It could be that I just need a little bit more fabric. Might be that, I don't know, might go in with the blue. That's not quite right. I could even just leave it as the cotton wadding, and I might actually do some blue stitching on there. So I might try and see if I've got a thread that's a similar colour. Oh, there we go, similar colour to the blue. So what I might do is just stitch on there. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. And I do think this is the best way to work when you're doing this, is just see what happens, see what comes along. Because sometimes it can really surprise you when, like that, I was sat the other night, yesterday, just pinning all that together, and I thought it looked really nice, and now you go and find other bits in your stash and you start building them up. So I quite like how this is becoming a little bit fussier, but this is very, very simple and plain. I mean, it could be that you might want to match these up. I don't think it really needs anything else on that side. Sorry that it keeps going out of focus. I think it's because I'm moving my hands a little bit too close to the screen, but I do know that I want to move that across. I do still like that because I quite like the idea of the squares versus the circles and that. So that's going to be the next bit that I'm going to be doing, just sitting and stitching all that together, and then I will give you a last little look at the page when it's done, and then we can start thinking about the next 2 pages. Right, so I've done pages 1 and 2. So this is the back of page number 1. So this was the piece that we patched in the last little bit of the video. And this is what pages 1 and 2 look like, which basically was squares, straight edges with a circle. And you can see how I've mirrored some of the design elements so that it still links, even though the fabrics, some are similar, some are very different. We've still got that same colour range, so we've got the greys, the blues, tiniest little bit of yellow just in there, but it doesn't dominate at all. And it's just been lovely to play with the different fabrics. So this side, very simple, 3 squares on top of each other with a circle and a strip, but it's the stitching that really makes that difference, and also fraying those edges really does look nice. It really softens it down. You can still see a little bit of my cotton wadding around the edge of this one, whereas this one goes right the way to the edges. And I know last time I was talking about different bits and pieces, so I decided not to put anything here. It is just the blue stitch that just goes straight across with the wadding, and I did decide to use the lace. It was a little bit better than the heavier piece that I was going to put in, so I just feel it's worked a lot better. Little elements that have been copied, the little star shapes that I did with the straight stitch on this side, I've mirrored in the section that was cut out. The little bit of lace trimming down there, ended up moving that one, but also using your fabrics to influence the type of stitching that you do. So the fabric was this see-through grid work, I suppose, so just taking a section of that and adding that on, then just doing the cross stitches. There's no other stitching on there, so the edges are still loose. It's just the cross stitching that matches it in, using a little bit of borrow and shishiko stitching here just to create a bit of a quilted effect. So this is straight stitch going one way and going another way that creates crosses, but it bunches up the fabric. So you get this beautiful, beautiful texture going on. Filling in some of the plain fabrics with straight stitch. Like I said, for these particular pages, that's all we were using, was a straight stitch in very, very different ways. So we're starting off nice and simply, but actually when you look at it, it doesn't look simple once you get all these layers and you've really worked into things. I love doing these circles around the edge and the stitches. I've been using my shishiko needles, which are the really long needles. Really nice for doing these long lengths because you can do quite a few all in one go. Because they're quite a thick needle, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult just to get it going through some of your fabrics, so some of them you'd have to do up and down, but it's just a lovely, lovely way of working. So there's pages 1 and 2 already. Hope you're ready with your stash and you are ready to start sharing your work. If you share it on Instagram, that's great, we can all see it. We've got the hashtag, which I'll put at the end of the video, and I will see you soon.